G'day everyone. This video is the first in a series I'm putting together about eating rutty bucks. And so to be more specific, I guess we'd say eating fallow bucks that have been shot during the time period that we refer to as the rut. My intention with these videos is to put out some content that other deer hunters and hunters in general may find interesting and informative, and hopefully promote some positive discussion in the hunting community regarding eating venison more broadly and eating stinky bucks more specifically. I'm not going out of my way to be provocative by making these videos. I understand that some people may disagree with eating ruddy bucks, or they think that eating these ruddy bucks is a waste of time because they think they're no good. I welcome disagreement. If you disagree, then leave some comments below. Let's have a conversation about it. There's no point being a keyboard warrior and just throwing out some silly offhanded comments, but if you feel differently, then let's have some positive discussion around it. This first video is going to look at what the rut actually is and go into some ideas that I have personally about the rut and eating these ruddy bucks in general. The second video is going to look at how the physical condition and health of these fallow bucks changes from the start of the rut to the end of the rut. The third video will go into detail about what you might want to consider once you've got a buck on the ground and you're going to start cutting him up and recovering that meat from the field. The fourth video is going to be more gear specific, and I'll be talking about some of the gear I take in the field with me when hunting deer, when aiming to recover plenty of venison, and some of the different ways I use that gear. The fifth video will be a similar kind of idea, but look at the gear more at home and in the kitchen. So it'll be things like the butchering knives, vacuum sealers, mincers, and some of the cooking tools as well, like pots and pans, pressure cooker, slow cooker, sous vide, that kind of thing. The sixth and final video in the series will be looking at some methods we use to cook these deer. It won't be specifically covering step-by-step recipe guides, and it'll be more about things like how do we get the most out of the neck? How do we get the most out of the backstrap? What are some things we consider when cooking this stuff to make it tender or make it approachable for people so they're not put off by the fact it might be a bit tough or it might be a bit strong in flavour. If people find any of these videos interesting and they would like to see more, or more specifically would like to see some videos about recipes that we like to cook from start to finish, then let us know when we get there and we'll put some more videos together about that stuff in the future. With that out of the way, let's get stuck into this first video.
I've seen a lot of talk on the internet over the last couple of years from people saying bucks are no good to eat in the rut and it's a waste of time. Now, there are some exceptions, but for the most part, they aren't as good to eat as a spiker or a younger deer. Let's consider what the phrase good to eat means. Typically, when we're talking about wild game, people want something tender that does not have a strong flavour. Something else to consider is that we've seen helicopters shooting a lot of country in parts of Australia over the last few years, and in all of those cases, a huge amount of venison is left to rot in the bush and no one gets to use it. Personally, I don't know that I would be happy to argue about waste when it comes to helicopter shoots if I were leaving the meat from all the bucks I shoot in the bush. On the flip side, it was only a few years ago when COVID stopped the supply chain in many parts of the world and the meat aisles in grocery stores were completely empty. This is another factor why I like to take the meat from all the bucks I shoot home and feed it to my friends and family. Sure, it may not be the best tasting venison out there, but it's definitely edible, and I personally feel bad wasting it. Having said that, this isn't to say that everyone absolutely needs to eat every buck they shoot. These decisions will always come down to the individual because we don't have the same sort of meat recovery laws here in Australia as other parts of the world. The point of this video isn't to lay guilt on anybody. It's just showing people that bucks are certainly edible, and there are some things you may want to keep in mind when hunting them and taking their meat. One more thing to consider is that we have it good here in Australia. Most of us can eat as much meat as we want, whether it's hunted or bought from a butcher or supermarket. We can be picky if we want. Plenty of other people around the world aren't so lucky, and that makes me feel terrible when I waste meat. So let's leave my little rant there, and we'll start to talk about deer hunting. What is the rut? Essentially, the rut refers to the time of the year when fallow deer breed. The rut is brought on by the shortening of daylight hours known as photoperiod. Anytime you see or hear the word photo, it is referring to light in some way. The does start to come into their estrus cycle when the days get shorter. Rut activity can include bucks running around like mad, lots of fresh rubs on trees, fighting, croaking, and combinations of all of these. The doe behaviour in the rut doesn't change as significantly as the bucks, but you will hear the does becoming more vocal when they wish to breed. I've seen rut activity as early as mid-March and as late as early May in my area, with a few exceptional situations and outliers on either side of those times, but for the most part, the middle 2 weeks of April is when I see the most activity. A fallow buck will drop his antlers sometime from about mid-September to mid-October. From this moment, he starts to grow a new set in velvet. The country is warming up and food is becoming more plentiful. Genetics ultimately determine the quality of a deer head, but good nutrition will allow them to grow a head that is a true indication of their potential. I've seen fallow heads during drought periods that appear stunted. The bucks continue to grow their antlers until roughly late February, and they harden. They start to rub their antlers on trees to remove the velvet, make marks for other deer to see, and strengthen their neck. A fallow buck's neck will increase in size by roughly 40% for the rut. Once they are rubbing out, their focus moves from food and onto does. In my area, I see a few bucks here and there growing velvet heads, but my main hunting properties hold a lot of does, and around that first week of March, I start seeing new bucks moving into my country. By mid to late March, I have bucks running all over the place as the area starts to get centered up with does that will start coming into cycle. When the action starts heating up, bucks will make scrapes, which are patches of ground that they tear up. They urinate on the ground and drag their antlers through it to throw their scent all over themselves. On some of the places I hunt, the same scrapes get hit year after year, so I usually know where to find them. The bucks also urinate all over themselves and rub the scent on rub trees that can be found in lots of places but are often close to scrapes. The scrapes are also places a buck might tend to want to occupy and keep his does close. Think of it as his patch, and the bucks can compete for good patches. You often hear people, bow hunters in particular, talking about rattling at scrapes. This is referring to a hunter bashing some cast antlers together to make a sound like two deer fighting, hoping a buck will want to come in and investigate and potentially get involved in the fight himself. Bucks are more likely to want to get into fights earlier in the rut as they are still in search of girls. The later you get into the rut, the less likely a buck may be to want to leave his girls to get involved in a fight. When you consider all these things, what actually makes a buck present as rutty? They often smell incredibly strong with their scent, which most people don't find pleasant. You will notice they can be very dirty on their face, down their flanks, and along the front of their back legs. This is usually mud or dirt that has come in contact with these areas after they've urinated in a scrape. Typically, a large deer is older and more mature, carrying more muscle mass. Right before the rut starts, they are usually covered in fat and in the best condition they will be in all year. And after a month of fighting and mating, they have lost all of their condition and look terrible. Skinny, covered in scars, visibly tired, and sometimes injured.
That's the end of the first video, guys. I hope you found it interesting, informative, inspiring, whatever the case may be. I hope you enjoyed seeing some of the footage of the deer doing deer things, because it's always great to see. As I mentioned at the start of this video, there's plenty more coming out after this, so if you'd like to be kept up to speed with that, hit the subscribe button. If you don't care to subscribe and that's not something you normally do, then just keep an eye out on the socials wherever this video popped up, and you'll see when I drop the next handful of videos anyway. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you on the next one.